Welcome everyone to the Thursday morning teaching. This morning we're going to be looking at a review of the perfection of meditative stabilization. And so we'll begin as usual with some prayers and then some breathing meditation, and I'll set a motivation and we'll go from there.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger.
So take a moment to check your posture. And it's always helpful to do a body scan before we sit. And especially as we're talking about meditative stabilization, then let's take a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, to settle into our meditation and really bring our attention to focus on the breath, either the rise and fall of the abdomen or the sensations of the breath below the nostrils, above the upper lip, and really trying to bring our full attention to extend the continuity of awareness to the breath as much as we can without being too tight, just in a relaxed way, continuing to bring our awareness to the sensations. Of course, distractions will arise, and each time they do, just bring your mind back to the object. This morning we'll be talking about the fifth perfection, the perfection of meditative stabilization. And as Venerable makes the point, the distinction between the perfection of meditative stabilization and the higher training of concentration is the motivation. Both are based on refuge in the three jewels, but perfections are motivated by bodhicitta, the wish to attain full awakening for the benefit of all beings. So I thought we might take some time this morning to do a glance meditation on cultivating bodhicitta, and this can serve as our motivation and also a short meditation to begin the class as well. So first, thinking about the sevenfold instruction of cause and effect. The preliminary is equanimity, isn't it? And so just briefly call to mind someone you see as a very dear friend. Think of someone specific. Also a stranger. And someone you find currently challenging. And with all three of them in front of you, just reflect for a moment how each one of these living beings wants nothing more than to be happy and wants lasting happiness. They want to be free of suffering. And so they spend their days searching for some kind of lasting happiness, often in very confused ways. But is there any difference between our wish for happiness and the wish for happiness of any of these three beings? That's looking at it from their side, and if we also think of it from our own side, and thinking about the continuity of our mind, each one of these beings has played the role of our mother, our father, our sister, our brother, our friend, as well as our worst enemy in previous lives, and not just once, but many times. Many times these people have been very dear to us in all sorts of relationships. The friend, the stranger, and the person we find difficult. So why is it we make such a big deal about feeling close to some and distant from others, just based on a few interactions in this one life alone? Why is it we put so much emphasis there? And is it necessary, is it reasonable to do that? What would it take to hold this broader awareness of equanimity in our mind? And so next we reflect about how all beings have been our mothers in previous lives. So some of you may find the quote from Shakyamuni Buddha attesting to this very moving, very inspiring. I didn't pull it up, I don't remember it, but Venerable Kadro brought it up when we were looking at equanimity, looking at this sevenfold instruction, where he said he couldn't find anyone who has not played the role of our mother, father, sister, brother, friend, etc. So we can draw on that quote, or we can briefly think of the continuity of our own mind. If we were to trace it back, what would be the cause of the first moment of mind that entered into that combination of sperm and egg? That first moment of mind is impermanent. It has to have a cause, and not just any cause. It has to have a compatible cause. And since mind is non-material, it has to come from something of a similar type, like a previous moment of mind. Where would we find the first moment of mind in any of our lives without a previous cause? And so just as we've required a mother in this life, we also required one in our previous lives. And so this is the basis for the thought that all sentient beings have at one point played the role of our mother, someone very dear to us, someone very kind to us. And not just once, but potentially countless times. The mother of this life has been our mother countless times. The father of this life has been our mother countless times. The mind stream, not the person, but the mind stream. Each of our siblings has played the role of our mother in previous lives countless times. It's true of every stranger we come in contact with, even the people we find most challenging. And so then recollecting the kindness of our mother, we try to use the mother of this life as the basis. Thinking about how she carried us in her body for 9 months, that's a big ask. That's a huge offering. She risked the pain of childbirth and then kept us fed and clean and warm and dry and took care of our every need for quite a while until we could do that for ourselves. Think of all the things that your mother taught you. How to hold a spoon or a fork or a chopstick. How to say please and thank you. When you go to the toilet, do you think, my mother taught me how to do this? So many things she taught us that we just take for granted. And so then we can extrapolate that to all the sentient beings who have also played the role of our mother. And if we've done these first 3 steps well, that will naturally lead to wishing to repay their kindness, giving rise to a kind of heartwarming love, feeling affectionate towards all sentient beings, which is the necessary step for then cultivating great loving kindness, wishing for all sentient beings to have happiness in its causes, not just temporal happiness, but spiritual happiness, lasting happiness of full awakening, and all the necessary causes to bring that about. And also wishing for them to be free of suffering, cultivating great compassion, wishing all beings to be free of suffering, and especially the most subtle, pervasive suffering of conditionality, and the fact that our 5 aggregates are controlled by karma and afflictions and propelled without any control from rebirth to rebirth. So really wishing for ourselves and all beings to be free of that condition, to be free of cyclic existence, and have all the causes for full awakening. And when we've done these 2 steps well, that brings us to the great resolve, which is stronger great compassion, where we want to take full responsibility to eliminate others' suffering and to bring them to full awakening, the happiness of full awakening. As Lama Zopa says, even if we have to do it all by ourselves alone. And so when we look around to see, well, who has the capacity to do this? It's only fully awakened Buddhas, and so that brings us to cultivating this aspiration. I must achieve full awakening for the benefit of all beings. That's the only way to get this job done. So may all my actions today, all my thoughts, the way I use my body, speech, and mind, the way I use my resources, my energy, may everything be directed towards this aspiration. Not just in lip service, but as much as possible, really moving my mind in this direction so that I can begin to fulfill the activities of the 6 perfections and move along the path to full awakening. So with these sentiments in mind, let's engage in this short review of the perfection of meditative stabilization. Clearly, I don't have bodhicitta. Those of you who live with me, you know that. However, I have great confidence that if I just keep repeating these lines and thinking about them and cultivating them, it's going to make a difference. So thanks for your willingness to go through that with me this morning. And it is what distinguishes these practices as being perfections. Venerable Rinchen, I sent you the link for the slides. Oh, you've got them. Venerable Lamso? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So here in the Middle-Length Treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, the 5th perfection is translated as the perfection of meditative stability. You might remember that we talked a lot about these terms so that we could come to some understanding, some greater understanding of what these terms actually mean. Because sometimes this is also translated as the perfection of concentration. Just depends on the translator. So these last 2 perfections, meditative stabilization and wisdom, are such profound subjects that to deal with them adequately, Lama Tsongkhapa is going to give a brief overview. That's what he's done with the 6 perfections, and then spend a lot of time going into them in great detail. And so as we've seen going through volume 4 on Friday nights with Venerable children, there's a lot of detail, more detail than I've been exposed to about the leaping and the different levels. So we'll get into some of that, maybe not all that detail, but some of that detail as we go further in this text. It's interesting to keep in mind that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the Middle-Length Treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment very close to his death, just 4 years before he died. And so he had written the Lamrim Chimmo like in 1404, I think, that's what I remember. And then he wrote this in 1415. And so it really talks about his, kind of like his final view of emptiness, as well as he gives especially detailed instruction on shamatha, how to develop shamatha, or calm abiding serenity, because that's the important precondition for developing insight into the nature of reality. And he also introduces some new things in this text, the Middle-Length Lamrim, that weren't included in Lamrim Chimmo. In many of the sections, he's just summarizing, he's condensing what he's talked about in the Lamrim Chimmo. But in the shamatha section and the insight section, there's actually new material. He brought in a long section on the 2 truths that we have the luxury of going through with Venerable Kadra when she returns. So, if you go to the next slide, let's just review these terms that we're using. So the 5th perfection is the perfection of meditative stabilization. The word in Tibetan is samten, or in Sanskrit, dhyana. So think about where you've heard those terms, dhyana in particular, or jhana in Pali, or meditative stabilization or concentration in English. So those 2 terms are both used to refer to this type of concentration, this type of mind that is concentrated, let's put it that way. And everybody has concentration, even animals. You know, just looking at our cats. Sometimes they are so focused on something, like if they're out in their catio and watching a chipmunk. Isn't that what they're called, a catio? They're watching a chipmunk with single-pointed concentration, or Upeka watching Karuna eat her food with single-pointed concentration. So even animals have concentration. We have moments of concentration, don't we? But here, samten, or meditative stabilization, is a particular type of concentrated mind. It's a single pointedness of mind that's developed as part of our spiritual practice. So it's more specific to religious practice. And so we need to be aware of how these terms are being used and what context. It's helpful if someone knows or has access to the Tibetan and knows it well enough, they can research it and see what word is being used. But that would be a select few in the room, I think. But sometimes we can tell just from the context of how it's being used. So the next slide talks about another word, concentration, or let's start with the Tibetan. Tingezin is describing a particular mental factor that's accompanying a main mind, right? A main mind of a main mental consciousness. So tingezin, or samadhi. You know, that word gets bandied around very broadly, like it can refer to just about anything, but technically it means concentration, and it's referring to, well, in some contexts, it's referring to this mental factor of concentration. In other contexts, maybe it's just being used generally, a mind of concentration. I don't know, we have to check the context. But in English, that's usually translated as concentration. Depends on the author, so just be aware of that. Then the next slide. I have had some doubts or some unsettled questions about what is meditative stabilization. So I reached out to Venerable Dunyu, our friend at Sarah, and just asked him about this. So this is what he said, given what I asked him about meditative stabilization, or samten. It's one of the 6 perfections, one context in which it frequently appears. In this context, it seems to be a more general term for meditative states or practices, which can refer to a wide variety of meditations and uses, more as a general practice, just as we say meditation in English. So I found that very helpful, because I was trying to pin it down to something very, very specific, or a specific state of concentration. But it's really a general term, so that I found that helpful. In other words, the type of meditation is not specified with so much clarity. That said, even when used in the context of the perfections, it also strongly implies the meaning below. So he says another major context in which samten appears is when discussing the 4 jhanas, or the 4 samtens, the 4 concentrations of the form realm. Here we have the access concentration of the first meditative stability. You know, just as we attain calm abiding, we attain the access state. And he's included the Tibetan for those of you who understand Tibetan. So here we have the access concentration of the first meditative stability, as well as the actual meditative equipoise of the first meditative stability. So I was actually asking him, what's the difference between meditative stabilization and meditative equipoise? I haven't seen a clear definition of either of those, so I was curious about them. I won't go into meditative equipoise for now, but look how he's using both of them in that sentence. These also apply to the next 3 samtens, which are each differentiated by their accompanying mental factors, each one becoming successively more subtle. So those of you who are attending Venable's talks, you might remember that chart in the book where it shows how with each of the successive form realms, there are fewer and fewer mental factors to get in the way of someone's clear meditation. Okay, so then the next slide. As Venerable Kadro did, we'll use the Middle-Length Treatise as the basis of our talk this morning, and then add a few points from the Lamrim Chimo, and maybe a few from Volume 4 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. So I found this helpful just to compare the 2 outlines. I'm a big fan of outlines, as you know. I'm trying to convince you to be fans of outlines too. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa is condensing two of the points that are found in the Lamrim Chimmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path. He's combined, from the Lamrim Chimmo, he's combined number 2 and number 4 into his point number 3. So we'll see that as we go along. It's really got a lot of the same content, it's just condensed. So, talking about outlines, I just would like to share with you something that I did when I began studying Lamrim Chimmo many years ago. I made little summaries, little handwritten summaries of all the perfections. I still have them. I still turn to them sometimes. So it's got the outline, and then it just has a few main bullet points of what's underneath each of those. And it helps you to carry it with you. That's the point. So it's very easy to show up to classes like this. We're not being tested, so there's no real impetus to memorize things. But this is our work. This is our job description, as Buddhists, as monastics, is to understand this material so clearly that we carry it with us. So one way to do that is to be clear about the outline. Then you can see it in your mind if you're talking to someone about it. And this is what the great Tibetan masters do. I remember attending a teaching with Denpa Lotha Rinpoche one time in Dharamsala, and he was sitting on the cushion. Both of his hands were doing like this, although he didn't have a mala. But, clear he had done that many, many times. And he gave like a 2-hour teaching on one of the perfections. I don't remember which one. But it was like he was just reading it from the Lamrim that he had memorized. So, they memorized countless pages of material. But even just having the outline in your mind can be very, very helpful. So that's a little plug to memorize. Okay, so the next slide, we'll look at the first outline point in the Middle-Length Lamrim is the nature of meditative stabilization. So it's talking about how we define that term. And in the Lamrim Chimmo, it's basically the same thing, what meditative stabilization is. So the nature, from the Middle-Length Lamrim, the nature of meditative stabilization is a mind that abides single-pointedly on any suitable virtuous object. So we had a lot of discussion about that definition because Venerable Kadro had some reservations. And it's a little clearer in the Lamrim Chimmo. Meditative stabilization is a virtuous, one-pointed state of mind that stays fixed on its object of meditation without distraction to other things. So, matching that up with Venerable Dunyu said, it's kind of a general description, but it also has some important features here. It's a mind. It's a state of mind. It's not a mental factor. It's a state of mind. And it's a one-pointed state of mind. So it's not getting distracted to other things. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay, so Venerable Kadro, what she found problematic about that definition was the fact that virtuous was used to qualify the object rather than the mind. So we had a lot of discussion about that. And she said that we can abide single-pointedly on a virtuous object with a non-virtuous mind. And she was questioning, is that meditative stabilization? Can you think of an example of that? You have single-pointed concentration on a virtuous object, but with a non-virtuous state of mind. Is it possible? Not according to the Lamrim Chimmo definition, but what about using the first definition that we see? What about meditating single-pointedly on an image of a Buddha with attachment? That's my statue. I'm going to meditate on my statue. It's so nice. Those statues in the meditation hall are so nice. It's hard to look at them without seeing the paint, isn't it? Or meditating on any virtuous object with laziness in mind. That's a non-virtue. Feeling discouraged. Oh, this is so hard. So there are many ways that we could come up with many examples. So she asked us, what makes an object virtuous? And so then she talked about how the low-rig texts talk about virtue in terms of the 11 virtuous mental factors and then the actions that they motivate. But what makes an object virtuous? We might say things we meditate on to develop our mind, but then she gave the example of some of the things we meditate on are not so pleasant, like meditating on suffering. Is suffering virtuous? It's probably not. Okay, and then Venerable Chuni brought up this doubt about, how it's said that even meditating on an image of the Buddha with a mind of anger is considered, virtuous because it leaves a positive influence on our mind. So the next slide, I found this in Approaching the Buddhist Path, where Venerable debunks a lot of the fallacies that get thrown around or the propaganda that gets mixed in with the Dharma. So I'll just read this, and I thought this was interesting. In statements about the effects of our interactions with Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and their images, the heaviness of the karma is primarily due to what is called the power of the object. That's what you were talking about. That is, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are remarkable beings who have accumulated merit for countless eons and have continually engaged in benefiting sentient beings. Venerating such beings, making offerings to them, and assisting them in their virtuous work create powerful karma, because being weighty in virtue, holy beings are powerful objects. So we could say there are virtuous objects. We could say that. Similarly, interfering with their good deeds or scorning them leaves heavy, harmful latencies in our mind. Whether our actions regarding holy objects have the potency to bring strong or weak effects also depends on the context of the action. So it's not just the object alone, but the context of the action. Let's say a person who is not a bodhisattva gets angry at a bodhisattva for whom she usually holds a great admiration. Her anger is not rage, rather she lost her temper over a small thing. If she immediately regains mindfulness and regrets her anger, I don't think she will experience suffering for countless eons. Now, I'm not sure, this may be His Holiness speaking here. However, another person has no regard for bodhisattvas in general and is antagonistic towards one another in particular. If he gets angry towards that bodhisattva, the harsh consequences mentioned above may apply. So it depends, doesn't it? And then the next line is, results arise independent upon a multiplicity of causes and conditions. So scriptural statements must be understood in that light. So although we may read these very simple, straightforward statements or hear them repeated, but still, and I appreciate this about Venerable very much, she reminds us constantly about how there are countless causes and conditions behind everything that's going on, not just one cause. But our mind likes to simplify things so that we can pin it down. Yeah. So maybe that's helpful to keep in mind. Okay, so it's a mind. It's a mind that abides single-pointedly. So when we talk about from a low-rig point of view, when we use the word mind or state of mind, that's referring to a primary mental consciousness, not a mental factor. And it says, from the Middle-Length Treatise, it says on any suitable object. So later, as we did in Volume 4, later in this text, we will go into the objects, the many, many objects that a person can focus on. Okay, next slide. So then how to begin the cultivation of meditative stabilization? So I'm following the Lamrim Chimmo outline here primarily, because the second step is this one, which is number 3, when we look at the Middle-Length Treatise, how to generate it in one's mind stream. So it says, think over the benefits of cultivating meditative stabilization and the faults of not cultivating it. I will explain this in the calm abiding section. This is from Lamrim Chimmo. The way to begin is the same for all 6 perfections. We have to think over and understand the benefits of cultivating meditative stabilization and the disadvantages of not doing it. If we are sure about the advantageous results of the practice, we will be interested in doing it, even if there are hardships involved. Have you found that to be true in your practice? Well, maybe not about meditative stabilization yet, but any topic, have you found that when you understood the benefits, that it inspires you to engage in the practice? So we can apply that here with this topic as well. And if we don't see the benefits, we will not want to bother. So this comes later in the section on serenity, but there is this kind of this formula of faith or confidence in a topic, particularly like calm abiding, when we really understand all the good qualities that can come from it. That leads to the mental factor of aspiration. We aspire to cultivate it in our own mind. And that's what leads to the joyous effort that actually gets us on the cushion to do it. And that joyous effort is what leads to the pliancy found in cultivating a calm abiding or serenity. So, yeah, again, I have found that to be true in my own experience. So it's possible that we haven't yet cultivated the perfection of meditative stabilization in our practice, but we can identify some of the benefits that we've found in developing concentration in whatever ways we have. Have any of you done 10-day Vipassana retreats? You have. Those are so helpful. You have. Okay, few people. Or even doing winter retreat when we have fewer distractions. All of us have done that. Probably you've noticed how your mind gets much more concentrated. So what are some of the benefits that you've experienced at times when you focused on developing concentration, or like in retreat, built up concentration through less distraction and more practice? What are some of the benefits you've noticed? Yeah. Would someone please get me a cup of water? Just room temperature water, thank you.
I've seen that it just carries on throughout the day, of just feeling more calm and stable and mindful throughout the day.
Boy, that's a huge benefit, isn't it? Yeah. What else? Yeah.
At one point, my analysis was deeper than normal.
Mm-hmm. So you find some clarity of mind when you come to reading or meditating on something? Yeah, and it goes deeper. You have a deeper experience with that. What else?
When my mind goes to negative places, it's easier to bring it back to positive.
That's a benefit.
I'm more aware of what's happening in my mind, so I can catch it quicker.
When I'm less distracted, I'm more inspired in my practice.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that a blessing? It doesn't feel stale and repetitive. Thank you so much. What else? I find my desk is neater when I am... It's true. My desk is really messy right now. Yeah. When I was leaving Australia to move to the Abbey, we were finishing up with a 3-week Yamataka retreat. And in between sessions, I would go back and pack up my house. I got so much done. It was great. It really was helpful. What else do you notice? What else have you noticed?
I think you're right about that. Just a lot more energy in the break times because your mind's not caught up with afflictions. I need a lot less sleep.
Yeah. Boy, that's a benefit. Okay. So there are a lot of benefits to be had, aren't there? Even if it's just 10, 15 minutes of concentration meditation in the morning. Can really benefit. Like if you think back to the time that we were doing the 4 establishments of mindfulness, I suspect many of us were doing more breathing meditation in that retreat. Is that true? It's one of the ways to meditate on the body or mind. Yeah, mind. Did you find that helpful in that retreat? Did you find your mind more concentrated and focused? And even when we're doing deity retreats, because we're focusing on the clarity of the deity, if we really spend some time visualizing that deity clearly, that's a way to develop concentration. It doesn't have to be the breath. Or even going through an outline systematically. That takes a certain amount of concentration. Or like going through the 7 steps of developing bodhicitta. That takes concentration. And we can even consider, Geshe Tashi Tsering used to say, we could even consider that type of meditation one-pointed concentration, because we're one-pointed on bodhicitta. We may be using a lot of different reasonings to develop that, but as long as our mind is consistently going through those steps, it's one-pointedly on developing, the 7-fold cause and effect instruction. Okay, then the next slide. So here are some of the benefits that Tsongkhapa mentions in the section on shamatha or serenity, and I suspect there are more. I just didn't have a lot of time to search for them, but this is from Geshe Sopa's commentary. So he says, as you progress along the 9 stages, many excellent qualities arise. And we're all on the first stage. Don't forget that. We're all on the first stage. As soon as you start concentrating, you're on the first stage. So we may not get much further than the first stage, but I think the first stage is until you get to the point where you can keep your concentration as long as it takes you to recite a mala of Om Mani Padme Hum. So what is that, about a minute and a half? Then one can progress to the second stage of the 9 stages. So it's not that difficult to go from 1 to 2. We could do that in the winter retreat. But so he says there's an increasing ability of the mind to suppress afflictions and negativities. So that's a benefit, isn't it? And we've heard about that in volume 4 as well, that one of the reasons that some of the hearers and solitary realizers and the bodhisattvas want to cultivate strong concentration is because it strongly suppresses the afflictions. And then all those benefits that we've been talking about accrue even more. There's an increasing ability to stay vividly and clearly on the object of meditation without distraction or sleepiness for as long as you wish. So I think a number of us have challenges with sleepiness. So that'd be a great benefit. And then once shamatha is achieved, now that's a big accomplishment, but once shamatha is achieved, there is the ability to meditate comfortably for as long as you like, since the body is in complete harmony with the mind, called the bliss of shamatha, a sort of sensual pleasure. The harmony of body and mind that results from shamatha is an example of the mundane or worldly virtuous quality in that it can be achieved by non-aryas. Still, that's quite an accomplishment. And keep in mind that we've already all done this before. We've done it before. They say we've done everything. So we have achieved calm abiding before. We just didn't keep it up, or we didn't apply it to emptiness. So we can do it again if we put our mind to it. And then shamatha is the basis for the wisdom that uproots all the mental afflictions. It's the basis for developing wisdom directly realizing emptiness, which we need to purify our minds. So these are just a few of the benefits. I'm sure there are many more. Can you think of some more from our study on Friday nights? Like it's the basis of developing the concentrations, the 4 concentrations, and the meditative absorptions. Makes the mind very flexible, very agile. Yep.
This isn't connected exactly what you said, but it would increase our ethical conduct. Right?
Yeah. How so?
I'm more aware of, if I'm more clear-headed and more focused, I'm going to be able to be much more on what I want to do and what I don't want to do.
Yes, and as was mentioned, catching the affliction sooner, putting down faster. Okay, so we can continue adding to these benefits and use them in our, to encourage our mind. All right, next slide. I love that picture of Venerable, by the way. It's the background from my iPad, and when I look at it, I think, get busy. What are you doing? How's your mind in virtue? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? So it's a good reminder. Okay, so then the third point in the Lamrim Chemo is the divisions of meditative stabilization. This is the second point in the Middle-Length Treatise. Its subdivisions. So it's talking about the nature, the orientation, and the object. So then the next slide. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about dividing it. There are many ways to divide this pie of meditative stabilization. So we talk about it in terms of its nature, and that's twofold, mundane and supramundane. So probably it's on the tip of your tongue what that means in terms of meditative stabilization, not the general understanding, but how do we use those terms? Who would be willing to just summarize that? Yeah.
Mundane's not supported by realization of emptiness, and supermundane is.
Okay, that's the general understanding of those two terms. And that's what I said in Venerable Kadra's class. But more specifically, anyone else? Yep.
I remember there being a distinction about whether one is just meditating on the coarseness and peacefulness versus the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah. Right. The coarseness of the lower realm and the calmness or peacefulness of the higher realm, really with the aim of just cultivating different states of concentration, not aiming to get out of samsara. Yep. Which it's necessary to include the wisdom, as you mentioned. Okay. Then the orientation. So this, the next slide, please. Oh, no, stay there. So the orientation, this is interesting that it's talking about the orientation being threefold in terms of focusing on an object without any analysis or discursive thought, just single-pointedly on an object, such as an image of the Buddha, the breath, etc., various objects, to develop calm abiding. So if we think about it in terms of these three orientations, that would really narrow the meditative stabilization, wouldn't it? If it's clearly just being used for these three purposes, these three orientations, to develop calm abiding, that's one. Okay, and to develop calm abiding, there could be any number of objects, which we learned about in Volume 4, page 153, if you're interested. Then the next topic is special insight. So here, how it's described, I appreciated Venerable Kadra bringing this point up, that generally when we talk about special insight or the union of the two, calm abiding and special insight, those actually are referring to the same thing. It's calm abiding imbuing one's wisdom realizing emptiness in a union. But here they're separated out, so special insight may be describing our development of understanding of emptiness until we have that union of the two. Is that what you? A similitude, yeah, that's a nice word. So it's a similitude of special insight, not actually the union of calm abiding and special insight. Yep.
Does this have to be special insight, or can it be like special insight means insight into emptiness, right? Can this also mean insight into like subtle impermanence?
I think so. Yep.
So, yeah, okay.
In fact, we need to develop the calm abiding and special insight focused on something else before we develop that focused on emptiness. Yep. Okay, so this special insight could be the mundane insight, like Venerable Rinchen was talking about. Remember when we go through those 7 stages from the access stage up to, what was the final one called? I forget. There are those 7 stages on each one of the form realms. We go through 7 stages. There's, I need to review this. Anyway, that's leading to a mundane insight. We're using mundane insight in that situation. But when we're cultivating emptiness, then or I guess even doing this with something like subtle impermanence. And then there's the supramundane if we're talking about focusing on emptiness. Okay, and then there's the union of the two. So in the Middle-Length Lamrim, they use the word orientation. In, I think it was Lamrim Chimo, they use the word object. So different ways of understanding. So it's really, we're so fortunate that we have these two texts translated into English that we can do this kind of juxtaposition of the two and gain more from looking at the word choices that the different translators used, and maybe one brings a little more understanding than another. And then we are talking about the functions of meditative stabilization. And I'll be honest, these are still a little bit obtuse to me. I don't know if you've spent much time trying to understand them, but let's just go through them and see if what we can understand. So in terms of functions or results, there are threefold. The meditative stabilization that causes one to abide in physical and mental happiness in this life. And so Tsongkhapa says the first is the meditative stabilization that generates physical and mental pliancy as one places the mind in meditative equipoise. So when we cultivate serenity in particular, there is this physical and mental pliancy. And pliancy is a virtuous mental factor where we can use our body and mind in whatever way we want. That'll be so handy. You know, you can stay in meditation for as long as you like without distraction. So the body and the mind become very serviceable. And then I imagine that when you get up from your meditation, you still have some of that pliancy. So even in the session, the post-meditation sessions, you would still have more serviceability of the body. You could engage in offering service without getting tired or sore or bored or, or whatever the case may be. So Geshe Sopa added a few things. He said the first type of meditative stabilization is mundane. It focuses on this life. The mind is usually distracted. True? Wandering, discursive thoughts dominate our lives. With the first type of meditative stabilization, we begin to control the mind. We are no longer distracted and can easily focus upon any object for as long as we wish. This power calms the mind, and because the mind and body are connected, it also influences the body. Nobody mentioned that when we were talking about the benefits, but I certainly remember, especially doing 10-day Vipassana retreats, the body is just so much happier. Most of the time, not all the time. There's also a lot of pain to deal with, but it does impact the body quite amazingly. So that's an advantage. Thus, by controlling the mind, its vehicle, the prana, or the air, is also tame. So mundane meditative stabilization brings mental and physical peace and bliss in this life. I don't remember reading that or hearing about that in volume 4. Maybe it was there. I was talking more about suppressing the afflictions rather than the benefit it brings to the body. Okay, so whatever you can hang on to about that, hold on to that. It's mundane. Then the second one is the meditative stabilization that accomplishes excellent qualities. So Tsongkhapa says the second is a meditative stabilization that accomplishes the excellent qualities shared with Shravakas, such as the clairvoyances, super knowledges, that's the section we're on right now in volume 4. The 8 liberations that abandon the obscurations to absorptions, the totalities and the masteries. I don't really know what those refer to. Do any of you? Totalities and masteries. Totalities may be a Pali word, I'm not sure. Anyway, Geshe Sopa describes this in this way. He says the second type of meditative stabilization yields a number of mental achievements. These attainments are not particular to bodhisattvas. Hinayana practitioners, both Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, also obtain these qualities when they practice meditative stabilization. So when a person develops this meditative stabilization in combination with certain techniques, then he or she obtains the first mental achievement of the 6 super knowledges. That's what Venerable called them. Okay, so it's not just enough to develop calm abiding. There also are these other things that need to be brought in. Do you remember Venerable talking about these on Friday night? I have a vague memory, but I don't remember it clearly, so I thought maybe one of you did. Okay, well the point is, it's not just calm abiding, but then doing some extra practices helps to bring about these super knowledges. And I remember in Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, Atisha's text, he talks about how calm abiding and the super knowledges are very important for benefiting sentient beings. So we actually need these, not to impress anybody, not to show off, but to be able to benefit sentient beings that might be benefited from super knowledge, supernormal powers, super knowledges. Yeah, super knowledges. That's what Venerable calls them. And one of them is supernormal powers. Okay, so you can read more about that in Volume 4 if you have interest on that, or join us on this Friday night. She's going to continue. We covered the first one, the supernormal powers, and now we'll continue with the next 5. So the first 5 of those are mundane, and then the last one is supramundane. It's the knowledge of the extinction of mental afflictions. This would also, I found this in Geshe Sopa's description. He says this second type of meditative stabilization, this orientation, includes that meditation on skeletons and bones. So that's mundane, but it may also bring about certain benefits. Okay, then the third one is the meditative stabilization that secures the welfare of sentient beings. The third, accomplishes the welfare in 11 ways by means of meditative stabilization. So remember how in the division of ethical discipline, the ethical discipline acting for the welfare of living beings, that included 11 types of beings. There were 11 types of beings that we were encouraged to benefit through ethical discipline, such as those who need help, those who are confused, those who have given help, those afflicted by fear, afflicted by sorrow, etc. Then in the divisions of joyous effort, which you reviewed last week, the joyous effort of acting for the welfare of living beings included properly applying yourself to the practice of 11 activities of others' welfare. And so this division of meditative stabilization in terms of function is meditative stabilization that accomplishes the benefit of other sentient beings. And so I think it brings those two together. He says, Geshe Sopa says, where we take steps to meet the needs of the 11 types of sentient beings, there is a particular meditative stabilization associated with each activity because we need the ability to focus, and we must discern the object, goal, and appropriateness of each action. So that's enhanced with meditative stabilization. So the next slide shows those 11 activities that are found in the ornament of clear realization. So working for others' benefit, that's pretty general. Working for their happiness, protecting them, being a refuge for them, being their place of rest, being their final resort, being an island for them, being a leader, being effortlessly present. That would be a nice quality. Not realizing the fruit as ultimately real, and being a perfect resource. So I think it was Geshe Sopa who said these last 3 are particularly helpful in realizing the mind of omniscience. Being effortlessly present, not realizing the fruit as ultimately real, and being a perfect resource. So it's just interesting. The Lamrim, I see the Lamrim as like a giant puzzle, and we're trying to put the pieces together, and there are many overlapping pieces. Some of you are nerdy like me and enjoy that. Others you couldn't care less, but that's okay. For now, maybe you'll develop that interest, maybe not. Okay, I think the next slide. So here we're looking at the 4th point in the Lamrim Chenmo is how to practice, and in the Middle-Length Treatise, it's how to generate it in one's mind stream. So I've just kind of summarized it here. How to generate in one's mind stream from the middle-length Lamrim includes the benefits of cultivating it. In other words, the thoughts regarding the benefits of cultivating meditative stabilization and the faults of not cultivating it. And he says these will be explained in the chapter on shamatha, so he's kind of putting it off. But also the training in meditative stabilization possessing the 6 perfections. So that's where he focuses on how you combine all 6 perfections in the perfection of meditative stabilization. When we look at the Lamrim Chimo, he has already looked at the benefits. That was the second step. How to, what was it called? Let me look. How to begin the cultivation of meditative stabilization was looking at the benefits. And so since we've already done that, then here he's focusing on the 6 supreme qualities. I think these will be spelled out more in the section on shamatha. I don't remember Venerable Kadro covering that. Yeah, so it's just another list. We won't go into that. But also talking about how all 6 perfections are included in the practice. So just as with the other perfections, when we practice meditative stabilization, there are, all the other perfections are included in the practice. So do you remember how, in general, we think about the generosity of training in any of the perfections, and here specifically in meditative practice, meditative stabilization? Do you remember what's involved with that? You can go to the next slide. I'll give you a clue. Abiding in that for oneself, and then establishing others in it, inspiring others to practice meditative stabilization. So that's true of all the perfections. We establish ourselves in whatever the perfection is, and that inspires or encourages others to engage in that perfection as well. So we can hang on to that, right? That was pretty easy. Okay, then go to the next slide. Before you do, okay, what would you think about how do we practice ethics of cultivating the perfection of meditative stability? Yeah.
To be mindful of what we're doing so that we are engaging in virtuous actions.
Yep, that would be inherent in oh, I see, okay, mindful. Why would we be doing that?
Maybe I don't understand the question, or yeah.
So how does mindfulness contribute to ethical conduct in practicing meditative stabilization?
So if we have more meditative stabilization during meditation, then perhaps we are able to carry that into our day and be more aware of what we're doing with our body, speech, and mind.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say. Anything else? Yeah, Venerable? Or Venerable Chinny?
It's said that the meditative stabilization, serenity, can be used to suppress the afflictions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to lead to more ethical conduct also.
Yep. Venerable Chinny, did you have something?
I was just thinking about the concentration on understanding our precepts and how we hold them at all stages, all levels, which enter the meditation practice. I mean, bringing meditative stabilization, especially into some of those key ones. It's a part of our practice.
Yeah. In fact, I think it's one of our bodhisattva vows. We'll come to that in a minute. Okay, so the next slide. Thank you. While cultivating serenity, keeping precepts, and living ethically. So You got it. Okay, and then fortitude. Go ahead and put the next one up. How is it that we practice fortitude in training in meditative stabilization? We're going to bear any hardships in what it takes to cultivate meditative stabilization. So this is good to think about with our upcoming winter retreat. You know, if we have to bear any hardships like stink bugs flying around in the room, or flies, or any other noise, or maybe someone next to you clicking their mala, because we'll probably be doing some mantras, or someone shuffling around or popping their knuckles, or things like that. So we can helps us to remember to bear hardships with whatever practice we're engaged in. Can you think of anything else that would fall under the fortitude of training in meditative stabilization? Yeah.
I guess not getting mad at yourself when you get distracted a million times and bringing your mind back again and again.
Amen.
Venerable, I'm very confused by these questions because I don't understand which direction they're going in. Like, is it the fortitude of meditative stabilization, or is it meditative stabilization of fortitude? And I get stuck on that.
Okay, let's go back and have a look. So, generosity of training in meditative stabilization is to abide in that yourself and then establishing others in it. So we're training in meditative stabilization and then practicing the generosity of training in that meditative stabilization. We're able to teach others how to do it. So that's the generosity. We're giving the fruit of our practice, in a sense, that we're helping others. Okay, so in that situation, which way does it go? How would you describe that?
I still don't know, Venerable. I'm confused.
Okay, so it may not be clear cut. That's what I'm pointing out. But let's look at the next one. So, yeah, Venerable.
I would like try to give an example of the opposite. Say I'm trying to practice fortitude, and I'm using the meditative stability of fortitude.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm just being mindful to remember why I'm practicing fortitude, and mindful of the antidotes to anger and such. And so that's coming from the other direction.
Wonderful,
And
thank
so
you.
looking at it from the other direction can help.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, so I think we could say that the main focus here is the meditative stabilization that we're cultivating. So how do we practice generosity with that cultivation? How do we practice ethics in that cultivation? How do we practice fortitude when we're cultivating meditative stabilization? Yeah, so thank you for your question. That helps clarify. Yeah.
Wondering with the confusion whether it's how the words are put, because my understanding is just kind of sobe something, so it's like this fortitude. No, sobe something is fortitude's stabilization. So it's actually the prostrophe is meditative stabilization's fortitude.
Okay.
So that's my
in Tibetan.
That's my understanding, that the apostrophe is, so it's the other way around.
So it's like the meditative stabilization is possessing that perfection.
Yes.
In a sense.
Yeah, so this is the other way around, so that's my confusion.
Uh-huh, okay. I think this is how it is in the book, but I take your point. So the meditative stabilization's generosity is abiding in meditative stabilization oneself and establishing others in it. Meditative stabilization's ethics is, while cultivating that, keeping precepts and living ethically. Meditative stabilization's fortitude is the patience bearing any hardship or obstacles to developing serenity. All right, does that help? Okay, yeah. All right, then the next one, joyous effort. Here's the epitome of joyous effort. So meditative stabilization's joyous effort is having joy when cultivating serenity. So another question is what is the relationship? And I'm just posing the question, I don't necessarily have the answer, but what is the relationship between serenity, calm abiding, and meditative stabilization? I'm guessing it's three possibilities. That meditative stabilization pervades calm abiding. Calm abiding is a type of meditative stabilization, but not all meditative stabilization is calm abiding. But I'm just wondering if you could think of, I don't think there's a calm abiding that's not a meditative stabilization. Okay, so that's why I'm specifically talking about serenity, because that's what we need to cultivate in our practice to conjoin with wisdom realizing emptiness to abandon the afflictions, right? Okay. So, having joy when cultivating serenity. Then the next one, meditative stabilization is creating the tendencies, habits that we want to continue in this and all future lives up to enlightenment, not giving it up. It's an essential quality. I can't remember where I got these. Oh, I got them from Venerable Kadra. Yeah, okay. And then the next one, the wisdom, meditative stabilization's wisdom is thinking about emptiness of the three spheres. So that's across the board, isn't it? That one's also easy to hang on to. It's thinking about the emptiness of the three spheres, the agent, the meditator, the action, the meditating, and what's meditated upon. They're all empty of inherent existence. Also having the intention to develop meditative stabilization, serenity in particular, single-pointed concentration, so that we can conjoin it with special insight to attain full awakening to benefit sentient beings. Okay. Then I found this nice summary in Geshe Sopa's commentary that I'd like to share with you. I'll just read it slowly. He says, bodhicitta is the basis of every bodhisattva activity. Like you mentioned in your motivation this morning, Venerable Nawang. Bodhicitta is the basis of every bodhisattva activity. The purpose of every bodhisattva action, including meditative stabilization, is to benefit other sentient beings by freeing them from misery and leading them to enlightenment. In order to lead others to this state, we have to have reached it ourselves. We must remind ourselves again and again that our effort to develop meditative stabilization is not for our own peace and emancipation. It's for the benefit of other sentient beings. Even at the beginning of our practice, we keep focused on our goal of liberating others. We practice the lower levels of meditative stabilization, wishing to achieve the higher levels as soon as possible so that we can help them. Our practice must include this motivation in order to be a Mahayana practice. It's a good reminder, isn't it? If we are aimless or focused on something like temporary peace, we will not be practicing the great vehicle. We should not meditate without conscious intent. Before beginning, we must think about its purpose, how to do it, its benefit, the disadvantages of not doing it, and so forth. Then we will work joyfully to the best of our ability for as long as we have time. Those of us who have taken the bodhisattva vows, or precepts, should try from time to time to train in meditative stabilization. If we do not, we incur the fault of breaking the precepts. So, maybe we do that this winter. Furthermore, if we have promised to train the mind continuously, but later just let it go, we develop a bad habit. This negative predisposition will make it difficult for us to succeed in overcoming our faults in this and other lives. In contrast, if we continue to make an effort to develop meditative stabilization, even if it looks like there's no possibility of success, there will be benefits in this and future lives. In this life, the mind will become more stable, distractions will become fewer, and the power of the distractions will diminish. Because the mind will be more settled when we engage in meritorious activity, the merit we accumulate will be more powerful. The Questions of Subahu Sutra says that as a result of this practice, we will be born with a body and mind that are naturally more peaceful and happy. In the next life, the practice of meditative stabilization will be easier to accomplish. Once again, this is a very brief explanation because much more detail will come in the next volume. I will not expand upon it here. So he didn't go into much of the detail here. Like when Venerable was began to teach us this section from volume 4, she read the kind of like the disclaimer that came at the end of that section, which was inspiring us or encouraging us to engage in the practice even if it's difficult. Do you remember that? So maybe we're not discouraged yet because this section is so brief in the middle-length Lamrim. But when we get to the next section, then we can remember that advice and bring that into our study. Okay. Any further comments or questions? If nothing else, we've in doing the review, we've reminded ourselves of some of these points and reminded us of what we remembered, what we don't remember, what we need to go back and remember better. So hopefully it's been a benefit. And if there's nothing else, we can finish here. Venerable Chini.
I'm just looking at this. If you don't work this, it tries to sometime to develop meditative stabilization, it's a fault, and you'll have a habit of not being able to work on this for many lives. I believe I have had that habit for many lives. I have been most resistant to this topic of any other topic I've heard in the Dharma is the teachings on meditative stabilization. I have even had great aversion. So now I'm finally appreciating it, and I see, it's a big fault. So just a warning for those who may have a few more years than I do, that it is hard and it's really complicated, and it requires, to me, a lot of math, which is something I care about at all. Math. Yeah, when you start looking at the stages, you have to go up, you come down, and then you go up, and then you go down, and up and down, and who's going up, and who's going down, and what's the point, 1, 2, 3, 4 of this one, and 4, 2, 3, 4 of this one, and then you go down and go back up again, like fit, right? So I just want to encourage people to not do what I have and do this huge fault where you spend your whole Dharma life kind of having resistance to a very, very, very important topic and not having the expectation that it's actually going to bring a result that's more tangible, like it's way easier to understand precious human life, and so forth. I mean, going up the Lamrim for me is way easier to understand, and it makes sense at a way deeper level. So that's all I'm saying. I regret this at this point, but now I'm ready, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you've been making quite a point to, especially with the foundation of, or establishing mindfulness. Was that the time when you picked up focusing on the breath in more serious, more earnest action? Yeah. On one hand, I wish that I had started on the Mahayana path as soon as I met Buddhism, but I did Vipassana for 10 years. Actually, I appreciate that I had the opportunity to focus on my mind and focus on the breath for so long, because it does give an immediate experience, at some level. Certainly not great levels, but some level. And so we're lucky that we do the concentration retreat usually over Labor Day. And we can really make use of those retreats each time, and you know, it's so hard, but like not doing any offering service during that time as much as we can, just only the necessary offering service like making meals or, you know, but letting all the other stuff go and really putting ourselves into the practice, or even the retreats that we do here throughout the year. How many of us really give ourselves the opportunity to full-heartedly do a retreat? And how many of us are still checking email and doing bookkeeping and all the rest? I mean, that's just an example. We all have our own example of that. So I remember once asking Venerable, can we do a shamatha retreat? Can we actually, when are we going to cultivate this? She said, what about the 5 minutes when we're doing the Chinese chanting? You know, after we do Amitabha, there's a few minutes. Like, what I took from that answer is use every moment you have to cultivate awareness. So when we're walking between buildings, notice your feet. Pay attention to your feet. You know, that's walking meditation. When you have 5 minutes, you're standing, 3 minutes, you're standing waiting for Venerable. Focus on your breath. Or focus on one of the 4 mindfulnesses. Actually, focusing on anything is the point. And the more we do that, the greater our concentration is. And then we can spread that to other topics. So, Venerable Losang.
And we're taught, you know, that the faculties of mindfulness and introspective awareness are first cultivated through watching our ethical conduct. So being mindful through our day is very important. Mm-hmm. It's still not, you know, a concentration retreat, but in everything we do, just being mindful of what am I doing and what do I want to be doing and why do I want to be doing it. Mm-hmm. You know, and watching, we have the monastic mind motivation prayer, and it mentions distractive movement, distractive activities or something. Yeah, and you know, if we're sitting there doing this, you know, are we aware of that? You know, or you know, are we aware of what we're doing with our body? I find, you know, Venerable stresses that mindfulness is about being mindful of the mind. But I really appreciate Thich Nhat Hanh's approach because it's of being mindful of the body and our actions, because it's an easier way to start cultivating that in order to be mindful of the mind. We're practice the mind, we're cultivating mindfulness and introspective awareness from the grosser level to the subtler level. Mm-hmm. And then when we try to do a retreat, it's going to be easier.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Yes. No, that's right.
Just thought of, I guess, of another benefit that if I'm mindful and aware when someone's talking to me, I listen better. Mm-hmm. I can actually hear their information. Because I had an example yesterday where I was distracted and not listening, and it could have been a dangerous situation because I wasn't actually paying attention. And so it's a gift that we can give others by being more mindful and really listening to them.
That's true. Yeah, and it requires that we slow down. Well, is that true? You can be mindful moving fast. But I know at my level, slowing down is going to help. Okay, thank you. So we'll dedicate now.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.